My normal shifts were during the day, 9 to 5 like most people. But on that day we were short-handed on the night shift staff, because the last person who worked during those hours had just quit. We had lately had a whole lot of people quitting the night shift, so that meant I had to cover. Weirdly enough, I had never had to work the graveyard shift before then, and I was actually excited for it. I had brought some coffee and 5-hour energy with me because the hours ran 10:05, and there was no way I'd make it that far naturally. I got to my tower right before 10, when it was already pitch black, and the cold July night had fully set in. The tower was fairly tall, with several flights of stairs leading up to the top. The whole thing was mostly surrounded by thick forest, except for the trail I came in from and a murky pond that was just to the right of one of the tower's legs. The pond itself was covered in those little frog pads and had algae floating around over the surface. It was actually quite big for a natural lagoon. I climbed up and all I could hear was the non-stop sounds of crickets, frogs, and the occasional owl. When I hit the top, I fumbled with my keys until I finally found the right one, and walked right on in. The one room was small and square-shaped. 3 of the walls were mostly glass, and the other one was opaque and had the door I just came in. The roof went up like a pyramid for a short length until it peaked, and it was all made of wood. To my left was a nicely made bed and a nightstand with a lamp and a flashlight on top. Not like I'd be using the bed, though. On the wall next to that was my CB radio and communication stand, which every one of those towers had. Next to that sat my refrigerator and microwave, which was part of a small kitchen that extended to the other wall as well. Inside the kitchen on the right wall were several cabinets, some small ones that held snacks and some canned foods, and another set of giant cabinets that I couldn't open, which likely had vacuums and other cleaning supplies that were above my pay grade. Roomy. I went over to the communication stand and did my standard check to make sure everything was properly working. I called into the ranger station's channel and said, "Well, Donnie, it looks like it's just you and me tonight." Donnie didn't say anything back, so I figured he was just taking a shit. I went and grabbed the flashlight on the stand and reached into one of its drawers, pulling out a set of binoculars from it. I went back out onto the balcony and checked to make sure no fire hazards or any other kind of dangerous things were over there. Once I checked that box off my to-do list, I headed back inside and pulled out the chair from the communication stand and put it by one of the glass walls, and grabbed a granola bar from one of the kitchen cabinets to munch on. I put the binoculars up to my eyes and looked over the surrounding forest. It didn't seem like any animals were up and about, and no birds were in the sky either. I skimmed over a couple of clearings to make sure that no teenagers were off camping illegally. Then I went and peeked over at a far ridge where I saw a snowman standing alone in a gap of the trees. Hold the fuck up. It was July. I peeked again to see it wasn't a snowman but some kid in a shitty ghost costume. It looked like the ones from Charlie Brown, with the big black holes for eyes that looked more like they were colored black than actual holes. The kid was still and staring right into my direction, unmoving. I couldn't see the kid's parents anywhere, and by now it was rolling up on 11, so that meant something was up. I broke contact on the kid and walked to the radio, calling into the station. "Donnie, you off the shitter yet?" "Barely made it out, but I'm here." I chuckled. Donnie was always good for a laugh. "There's some kid with a blanket walking around the southeast sector, and they look alone." "A blanket? What the hell are you talking about?" "It's a ghost costume. It's got the black holes for eyes and stuff." "You mean like the Charlie Brown costume? Can you check it out?" "Yeah, I'll go out and see what's up. I'll call in on the walkie-talkie to tell you what I see." "Roger that." I turned off the radio and crossed over to the nightstand drawer to grab the walkie-talkie. Once I had it, I sat back down in the chair and put the binoculars to my eyes, zooming in to where the kid was. The ridge was empty with no kid in sight, which I knew would make this 1,000 times harder. I pulled up the antennae on the walkie-talkie and dialed to the right channel. "Donnie, you hear me?" "Yep, loud and clear. I'm getting close to the sector. I'm heading up to a ridge for a vantage point." "Perfect, that's where I saw the kid. But they've moved on since then." "Well, I'll just check around to see if I can find anything." I watched as Donnie came over the ridge, waving his flashlight around the dark, until he looked towards the tower and shrugged. "Nothing over here." "Damn, hopefully he turns up again. Until then, I'll just notify the police and check with any missing reports." "All right, I'll go back to—" Donnie's voice cut out and I saw his flashlight turn off in the distance. The small lit-up spot where he stood was swallowed in darkness. "Donnie." "You there, Donnie!" I heard no response, and I rushed outside the door and around the corner to where I saw him, yelling his name only to hear my voice echo into the woods. And that's when it hit me. There wasn't a single other sound in that entire forest. The crickets and frogs had stopped chirping, the wind didn't rustle through the leaves. Everything was completely standstill. I could hear my heartbeat throbbing in my ears and nothing else. I moved my flashlight around the woods for some futile attempt of finding him. I got into that state of mind where I got so scared my throat closed up. And if I moved, I felt like something very bad was going to happen. I had to do something now. I turned around, and as I did, I glanced at the stairs below me. At the bottom stood a skinny, horrifically angled woman. She was tall, dripping with water, with black hair and dark, murky blue skin that stretched across her bent and broken bones. Her gray dress was shredded, and her black shoes were muddy and wet. And her face, her eyes were milky white, and her mouth hung wide open like a snake, like her jaw had been grossly broken. She let out a blood-curdling and ear-piercing scream of agony, and began to shuffle up the stairs so fucking fast that I snapped out of my fear lock, and I ran the fuck back inside, slamming and locking the door behind me. There was no way she could run that fast, even if all of her bones weren't broken into wrong directions. I ran back to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find, and then I pulled out the walkie-talkie, screaming into it. "Is anyone there? Donnie, where the fuck are you? Someone answer me, goddammit." Then I heard the creaking of a door. I slowly turned, and I froze when I saw what was there. The door was still there, locked and shut, and had been completely undisturbed. What scared me was the once locked giant cabinet that now stood open, with a kid dressed like a Charlie Brown ghost standing just in front of it. I stood there unmoving until I heard the little shit giggle. I recognized that giggle. No fucking way. I pulled off the sheet to see one of Donnie's kids, Marvin, sporting a smirk and a walkie-talkie. "Dad." "Joey, I got him." "Huh, pissed his pants just like I said he would, right?" He and his other son laughed from the other end of the walkie. I was mad but glad that I wasn't about to get murdered in a goddamn wooden tower. I grabbed his walkie and shot back. "Pissed me off is what you did, you fucking asshole. I hope you're happy. Hearing you scream like a little girl sure did make me happy, all right." "Yeah, screw you too. That wasn't even me. That was your stupid zombie chick. Who was that, your wife?" "My what? Does the ghost look like a zombie from that far away? You said yourself it looked like Charlie." "Not the ghost, dumbass, the woman on the stairs. She screamed and ran up them so that she could scare me into the tower. Hell, she must be like an Olympic runner. Did you get Usain Bolt?" "Dean, I didn't put no woman on the stairs." Upon hearing that he would have the night shift for the next couple of weeks until they found a replacement, my friend quit and vowed never to return to that park. To this day, he swears that either Donnie never told him about that part being a prank, or that he saw something entirely unrelated. I've began to question my own participation in the night shifts, and consider myself lucky that the few times I've been on it, I had been stationed at the north and eastern sectors. There have been few occasions where I have actually taken the night shift. Most of the time I wrongfully pass out in the provided bed and wait until my shift ends. This story actually takes place during one of those occasions. I was fast asleep in the bed, even though the mattress was hard and didn't adjust to my back. I had done my sight check and stared at the woods for about half an hour, but time moves on and my attention wavers, so I came up with sleeping as my one solution to boredom. In an instant I realized I was awake, and I immediately sat up in the bed. Something had woken me up. It was one of those occasions where something loud happens and you wake up, but don't process it in time to register what it was. Whatever it was, it must have been loud. Glancing towards my alarm clock, I could see that it was 3:21 a.m. I rubbed my eyes of what little sleepiness was still in me, and looked around to see if maybe something had fallen. Everything seemed to be in place, but the lights were off and my nocturnal vision is less than supreme. I heard something shut. The tower door. The door was wide open, flapping in the wind. That must have been it. I left the door open a little, and a strong gust of wind must have thrown it open and against the wall. I guess it wasn't anything closing after all. That gust of wind was now going through the room and disturbing my warm temperature. I rolled off my sheets and hopped out of bed towards the door. I pushed it with some force towards the wall, hoping to recreate the sound and trigger a memory. But the door didn't even reach all the way to the wall, its hinge keeping it firm. I shut the door, fully this time, and went back to my stone-hard sleeping spot. I was able to fall back into a doze fairly quickly, before I was awoken again by what I assumed to be the exact same thing. I still didn't hear it. I looked towards the door and saw that it still remained shut, unperturbed since I last saw it. The alarm clock read 3:39. I had only been asleep for 18 minutes. I grew annoyed at the thought of not being able to fall asleep and got up to search the kitchen. Being the same kitchen as every other tower's, I could easily locate and check off each item I found as not being the culprit. All knives still in their holder, the microwave off, blender unplugged. The toaster didn't seem to be the cause, so that meant it probably wasn't an electronic making the noise. The floor was clean and all cabinets were shut. I was truly clueless and gave up my search to head to sleep. I sat under my covers, still awake, now in day mode because of all of my detective work. Then I heard it. It was a scream that sounded like a car tire stuck screeching on asphalt. I was only able to identify it as a vocal product because of the changes in pitch, going up and down in its high tone. It sounded inhuman, blood-curdling, and agonizing. I jumped out of the bed, tripping on my covers, and looked around. By now the screaming had stopped, but it was so loud that I knew it had to be coming from inside. I looked back to the kitchen. Whatever it was must be in there. I looked from the appliances on the counter to the drawers and utensils that were laid out, to the 2 giant cabinets that were at the other end of the kitchen. The office joker Donnie was on vacation in Hawaii. I had seen him post about it just earlier that day. There was no one else that worked here that was like that, which meant this wasn't a prank. I grabbed one of the knives that had sat in the holder and crept my way to the cabinet. I reached one arm to the silver handle, the other poised with the kitchen knife ready to defend myself. I threw open the door and readied myself for an attack that didn't come. I saw nothing in the cabinet besides a broom and other supplies that were above my pay grade, at first at least, until I glanced downwards to the raccoon that was crouched in the corner. It screamed that monstrous scream and I tripped backwards as it ran over me to safety, under my rock of a bed. Even it knew that mattress was unbreakable. I opened the door again and poked at the raccoon with the broom until it finally ran back outside. So maybe I did hear a door shut after all. Poor thing must have been shut in there by the wind. It didn't matter. The noise was gone and I was finally able to go back to sleep. I curled under my blankets and rested my head on the pillow, in serene peace, completely unaware of the horrific banshee that lied just above me on the ceiling. The last real conversation I had with Ranger Eli Mercer happened at 8:42 p.m. on October 17, 2019. By sunrise, he was gone. And 3 days later, something started using his voice over the radio. I worked as a communications operator for Blackwood National Park in northern Montana. Most people imagine park ranger work as rescuing lost hikers and telling tourists not to feed bears. But the truth is that huge sections of those forests are empty for a reason. There are places out there where even experienced rangers refuse to patrol alone. Sector 16 was one of those places. It sat deep in the mountains, nearly 40 miles from the nearest paved road. The forest there was dense enough to block sunlight even during the day, and strange weather rolled through constantly. Radios failed. GPS stopped working. Compasses drifted. Officially, the area was considered unsafe because of old mining tunnels and wildlife activity. Unofficially, too many people vanished there. Eli had worked the park longer than almost anyone. He was in his early 50s, quiet, divorced, and knew those mountains better than maps did. New rangers trusted him because he never exaggerated. Stories. That's why what happened still bothers me, because Eli was not the type of man to scare easily. The night he disappeared started normally. A storm had rolled over the mountains around sunset, knocking out 2 observation cameras in Sector 16. Eli volunteered to drive up and inspect the relay station before the weather got worse. Before leaving, he stopped by communications and drank stale coffee while complaining about his knees. "You still carrying that old revolver?" I asked him jokingly. He smirked. "Out there? Damn right." That was the last time I saw him in person. At 8:42 p.m. he radioed in while driving through the Southern Service Road. "Road's getting bad," he said through static. "Trees are moving like crazy tonight." "You want backup?" I asked. "Nah, just keep the coffee hot." Then the signal cut for a few seconds. When it returned, Eli sounded distracted. "Hold on." I heard his truck door creak open over the radio. Wind roared loudly through the transmission. Then Eli spoke again, quieter this time. "There's somebody standing on the road." I sat upright immediately. "What?" "About 50 yards ahead of me." Static crackled. "Can't tell if it's a hiker or not." "Tell them to approach slowly," I said. "Could be injured." For a few seconds I only heard rain hitting the truck. Then Eli whispered, "No." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean, no? That's not a person." The radio went silent. Then I heard the truck. Engine rev hard. Gravel sprayed beneath the tires. Eli cursed loudly. "It's running at me." The transmission exploded with static. Then came a sound I still hear in my sleep sometimes. Laughing. Not normal laughter. It sounded wrong, wet, forced, like something imitating what laughter should sound like without understanding it. "Eli?" I shouted into the microphone. No answer. Only heavy breathing. Then his voice returned suddenly, panicked and breathless. "It's still there." "How?" I drove almost 2 miles. Thunder cracked over the transmission. I can still see it in my headlights. I immediately called another ranger station and requested emergency support. While waiting, I stayed on the line with Eli. "Listen to me carefully," I told him. "Lock the doors and keep driving south." "I'm trying." The truck engine whined loudly. Then Eli said something strange. "It keeps changing." "What keeps changing?" "The face," and I felt cold all over. "What are you talking about?" Another long silence followed. When Eli finally spoke again, his voice sounded smaller somehow. "Now it looks like my daughter." Every sound around me seemed to disappear. Eli had a daughter named Claire who died in a car accident 11 years earlier. He never talked about her. Never. "Eli," I said carefully, "don't stop the truck." "I know that." But his voice was shaking badly now. "I know it's not her." A loud bang suddenly hit the radio. Eli shouted. The truck swerved hard. I could hear gravel and tires. Screaming, then came silence. A full 10 seconds of silence. Finally, the radio crackled again. Only now the voice speaking didn't sound afraid anymore. It sounded calm, too calm. "Dispatch," the voice said. "Yes?" "I found her." I frowned. "Found who?" Another pause. Then, "Claire." The voice smiled when it said her name. I don't know how else to explain it. You could hear the smile. Every instinct in my body screamed that something was wrong. "Eli, where are you exactly?" No response. Then the radio emitted a horrible screeching noise before cutting out completely. That was the final confirmed transmission from Ranger Eli Mercer. Search teams went out before dawn. They found his truck abandoned near an old fire. Road deep in Sector 16, driver's door open, engine still running. Mud and rain covered everything. But there were no footprints besides Eli's, no signs of animal attack. No blood. Nothing. The strange part was where they found the hike when it sat upright on the hood of the truck, still transmitting static, as if someone had placed it there carefully. Indeed, official report listed Eli as missing, presumed dead. Most of us believed he got lost during the storm and fell somewhere into the old mining tunnels. But 3 nights later, at exactly 1:14 a.m., his radio signal came back. I was alone in communications when it happened. At first I thought another ranger was testing frequencies. Then I heard Eli's voice. "Dispatch?" I nearly fell out of my chair. "Eli?" Static hissed loudly. "You left me up here." My mouth went dry instantly. "Where are you?" No answer. Then came the sound of breathing. Slow. Uneven. Like someone speaking through damaged lungs. "Cold," Eli whispered. Relief washed through me at first because part of me truly believed he was alive. I grabbed a pen immediately. "Okay, Eli, listen carefully. Tell me where you are." Static crackled again. Then his voice changed, only slightly. But enough. The words became stretched, almost distorted. "Come find." Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. It didn't sound like a request. It sounded hungry. I radioed nearby teams immediately, but by the time they triangulated the signal, it had vanished again. Over the next month, the transmissions continued, always after midnight. Always from Sector 16. Sometimes it begged for help. Sometimes it cried. Other nights it simply repeated the names of Rangers working that shift, one by one, slowly, like it was learning them. Then came the final transmission, the one that made the park service permanently close Sector 16 patrols after dark. Happened during a snowstorm in November. 3 Rangers were stationed with me in communications when Eli's voice suddenly returned over every radio frequency at once. At first he sounded normal, almost human. "Please," he whispered weakly. "I'm hurt." One of the younger Rangers reached for his coat immediately. Before any of us could stop him, he grabbed his truck keys. Then the voice on the radio laughed. That same horrible imitation of laughter from the first night. And Eli's voice said, "That's better." The station lights went out instantly. For 3 full seconds, everything was black. Then, the emergency generator activated, and every radio speaker in the building exploded with screaming. Not one voice, dozens, men, women, children, all screaming together beneath roaring static. One of the Rangers vomited on the floor. Another started crying. Then suddenly, silence. The radios died completely. A minute later, one final sentence came through Eli's frequency. Quiet, clear, and impossibly close. We finally got inside. The signal never returned after that night. 2 months later, I resigned from Blackwood National Park. I still keep the original recording locked away in my garage. Sometimes I think about destroying it, but every now and then, usually during storms, I swear I hear faint radio static coming from inside the box. And once, I heard Eli laughing. I took the winter security job because nobody else wanted it. The pay was absurdly high for 6 weeks of work, and according to the company, all I had to do was monitor an isolated weather station in northern Alaska until the research team returned in spring. No tourists, no towns nearby, no human contact for almost 50 miles. At the time, that sounded perfect. I had just gone through a divorce, my apartment lease was ending, and I needed money fast. So when I saw an ad looking for overnight security, personnel at a remote Arctic station, I signed the contract without asking too many questions. The helicopter dropped me off just before sunset. The station sat alone on a frozen ridge surrounded by endless white wilderness. Massive snow dunes stretched in every direction like frozen ocean waves. The wind screamed constantly, rattling the metal buildings hard enough to make them groan. The pilot unloaded my supplies and shook my hand before leaving. "Storm's coming tonight," he said. "Don't go outside unless it's an emergency." Then he paused. "And if you hear knocking after midnight," he looked away toward the snowfield, "ignore it." I laughed because I thought he was joking. He didn't laugh back. Then the helicopter disappeared into the gray sky, leaving me completely alone. The station itself was small. 2 sleeping quarters connected to a central research building and a radio tower. The researchers had already winterized everything before leaving. Most rooms were shut down to conserve power. There were only 3 rules listed in the station handbook. Never shut down the exterior floodlights. Keep the radio active at all times. 3. Do not investigate sounds outside during whiteout conditions. The first few nights were boring. I monitored weather equipment, logged temperatures, drank coffee, and watched snow hammer against the windows. Sometimes the wind became so loud it sounded like distant screaming. But on the 5th night, things changed. Around 1:13 a.m., the radio crackled to life beside me. At first, I thought it was static. Then I heard breathing. Slow, wet, like someone struggling to breathe through frozen lungs. "Hello?" I said into the receiver. The breathing stopped. A few seconds later, a voice whispered, "Open the west door." The transmission cut immediately after. I checked every radio frequency. Nothing. No nearby stations, no active channels. I told myself it was interference caused by the storm. But deep down, I knew that voice sounded close. Too close. I checked the West security camera mounted outside the station. At first, all I saw was snow. Then the floodlight shifted through the blizzard and illuminated a figure standing near the western fence. A person. Tall. Wearing heavy winter gear. Completely motionless. I stared at the monitor for almost a minute waiting for movement, but the figure didn't move an inch. I grabbed the radio microphone. "This is Station Echo 7. Identify yourself." No response. The figure remained still. Then slowly, it lifted one arm and pointed directly toward the station. Every hair on my body stood up. The nearest human settlement was over 40 miles away. Nobody could survive outside in that storm long enough to walk here. I kept watching. Then the camera feed suddenly distorted with static. When it returned 3 seconds later, the figure was gone. I checked every exterior camera. Nothing. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I forced myself outside to inspect the western fence line. The cold hit like knives against my face. Visibility was terrible even in daylight, but I found something near the fence almost immediately. Footprints. One single trail leading out from the storm. The prints stopped 6 feet from the station wall. Not turned around, not buried, just stopped. Like whoever made them vanished. That night I locked every interior door. At 2:41 a.m. the knocking started. 3 slow knocks against the west door. I froze in bed. Knock. 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 The sound was soft, patient, almost polite. I remembered the pilot's warning and stayed silent. Then came the voice. "Please." It sounded like a woman outside. Weak. Shivering. "Please let me in." I nearly opened the door right there. But something felt wrong. The voice never changed position. It didn't sound muffled by wind or distance. It sounded like someone standing directly beside my ear. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "I can see you." The knocking moved to my bedroom window. Knock, knock, knock. I turned slowly toward the glass. There was a face outside. Pale blue skin. Sunken eyes. Its mouth stretched into a smile too large for a human face. The thing outside wasn't blinking, and it wasn't wearing any winter gear. I stumbled backward so fast I fell onto the floor. When I looked back up, it was gone. The rest of the night passed in silence. At sunrise, I checked the snow outside the window. No footprints. Nothing. As if nothing had ever been there. I tried, contacting the company that morning and requested immediate extraction. No answer. Only static. Then, while checking storage inventory later that day, I found an old maintenance log hidden beneath a toolbox. Most pages were damaged, but one entry had been underlined repeatedly. February 14th. They keep copying the voices. Don't answer them. Don't let them inside. They wait during storms. I felt sick reading it. That night the storm returned stronger than ever. The station lights flickered constantly, and ice formed along the interior walls. Around midnight the radio activated again. This time I heard my own voice. Open the door. Then again. Open the door. Perfectly identical to me. The transmission continued repeating my voice while something walked slowly around the station outside. I could hear boots crunching through snow. Heavy, deliberate. Circling me. The floodlights outside suddenly shut off. Complete darkness swallowed the station. Then every exterior motion alarm activated at once. North side, west side, south entrance. Roof access. Something was everywhere. I locked myself inside the communications room with a flare gun and listened to footsteps move through the snow for nearly an hour. Then came scratching above me. Long nails dragging across metal. Back and forth. Back and forth. At some point, near dawn, exhaustion finally overcame fear and I must have passed out. I woke to silence. The storm had ended. Sunlight reflected across endless snow outside. Everything looked normal again. Too normal. Then I noticed the communications room door. Someone had written something across the metal during the night. From the outside, in long frozen streaks. We were here first. The rescue helicopter arrived 2 days later after the storm cleared. The pilot took one look at me and asked what happened. I told him everything. Every knock, every voice, every footprint. He stayed silent the entire flight back. Right before we reached the city, he finally spoke. "You're lucky." I asked him what he meant. He stared out the helicopter window toward the endless white wilderness below. "Usually," he said quietly, "they imitate someone you love first.